As time goes on, the past kind of starts to fade. Memories get fuzzy. We add in details that weren't there, or we lose important pieces of the story forever. But this story, I remember every single second of it. I don't even know how many times I've told it. Probably 100 or more. To my family, the cops, friends, even total strangers. And now, I've finally decided to just sit down and get it all on paper. It all started back in early September of 2002. My parents and I lived on the west bank of this tiny town in the Rust Belt. My mom was home all day because she was 7 months pregnant, and my dad was basically working for 2 people to keep us afloat. During the day, he busted his tail at a warehouse. Then, a few nights a week, he'd go out in his own car and drive people around like an unlicensed taxi until the sun came up. But no matter how late it got, he always came home to sleep. Until one Tuesday morning. I had just woken up and was lying in bed when I heard my mom in the kitchen. She was on the phone, talking really loud and frantic. She was asking if they'd brought my father in. I felt this immediate knot of anxiety in my chest. I got up and went to find her. She was just sitting there, looking totally lost. Her eyes were all swollen from crying.
Your dad, he didn't come home,
she whispered. Her hands were shaking so bad, she could barely hit the buttons on our old landline phone. She'd start dialing, fumble the numbers, hang up, and try again. But he was nowhere. Not at work, not at any of the hospitals, not even at the sheriff's office. Mom let me stay home from school that day. We went down to file a missing persons report, and the deputy at the desk wasn't exactly thrilled to help. He told us we were supposed to wait 48 hours, but my mom wouldn't take no for an answer. Seeing her that pregnant, he eventually gave in and didn't argue. We spent the rest of the day on pins and needles. We called every relative we had. We called the hospitals back 2 or 3 more times. Nothing. That night was the longest night of my life. We barely slept. Every little sound outside made my mom jump. She kept thinking she heard someone walking under the windows. At one point, I actually thought I heard a knock on the glass too, but when I pulled back the curtain, there was nobody there. Wednesday morning, our local priest came by. He and my mom talked in the kitchen for a long time. I sat in the other room trying to eavesdrop, but I couldn't really hear what they were saying. Just the low mumble of his voice and my mom's quiet sobbing. That afternoon, we went to church to light a candle for him. My mom was desperate. She was even asking people if they knew any psychics or healers who could help. But nobody had any answers for her. On the bus ride home, she just broke down. She kept clutching her stomach, looking like she was in pain. When we got back, she just sat in the kitchen, calling the hospitals over and over like it was her job. She even sent me to the neighbor's house to get the number for the county morgue. At first, nobody picked up. When they finally did, they told her they didn't have anyone matching his description. That didn't make her feel better. She actually started packing a bag, saying she was going to go down there and look at the bodies herself. I had to talk her out of it. I was just as scared as she was, but I tried to keep it together. I knew I couldn't upset her while she was pregnant, but these awful thoughts kept creeping into my head. I fought them off as hard as I could, but deep down, I was bracing for the worst. But what happened next? I never saw it coming. I couldn't have even imagined it. Thursday felt like it lasted a lifetime. We spent the whole day just drowning in anxiety. At one point, my mom said something that absolutely chilled me.
I'd rather they find him in the morgue than this. Not knowing is worse.
That was the first time I actually cried since he disappeared. We stayed up late that night. I was silently doing my homework at the table while my mom watched the clock. Every 30 minutes, she'd call the hospital and the police again. Suddenly, A loud knock at the front door shattered the silence. I jumped out of my skin. My mom went pale, stood up slowly, and kind of swayed as she walked to the door. When she opened it, there was my dad. He was white as a ghost and had this thick, scratchy stubble all over his face. My mom rushed to hug him, but he didn't even move. He just stood there. Then, without even taking off his shoes or his jacket, he walked straight into the kitchen. He looked strange, really strange. He was looking around the room like he couldn't believe he was actually home. He sat down on a stool by the window, caught his breath, and closed his eyes. My mom literally threw herself at his feet. She was sobbing, clutching his knees, and then she started hitting his hands, screaming at him, asking where the hell he'd been for 3 days. But my dad was silent. It was like he couldn't even hear her. He just opened his eyes, took a deep breath, and stared at the wall with his mouth hanging open a little. I stood in the doorway, totally frozen. My heart was racing. I quietly called out to him, but he didn't react at first. When I said it louder, he flinched. He turned toward me, and I'd never seen him look so hollow. There was this look of total frozen horror in his eyes. Finally, he whispered, "Give me a drink, just a little bit." Mom wiped her tears and looked at me. I knew what to do. I grabbed the bottle of bourbon and a glass from the cabinet. When he tried to pour it, his hands were shaking so bad, he splashed some onto my school notebook. He apologized quietly and patted me on the shoulder. After 2 glasses, he put his elbows on the table and covered his face with his hands. My mom got up off the floor, washed her face at the sink, and sat down next to him. I sat down too. He was quiet for a long time. Then he pulled a crumpled pack of cigarettes out of his pocket, only 2 left. He put one in his mouth and tried to light a match, but he kept breaking them because his fingers wouldn't stop shaking. My mom finally had to light it for him. He took a long drag, and with his voice almost stuttering, he started to tell us what happened. "At first, everything was normal," he said. "I was down by the waterfront looking for fares, driving back and forth between the square and the suburbs. I stopped near that little shop by Jefferson Street to grab some cigarettes or a snack. When I got back to the car, there was this old man standing there. He looked ancient, really fragile, with a cane. He was so thin, all hunched over, and I could tell he was freezing. He was shivering. He saw me and started waving his hand, trying to say something, but the wind was howling so loud I couldn't hear him. I walked closer. He was confused, and he said,
"I'm lost. I went to see my son and got turned around. I don't have any money, just some bus change, but the buses stopped running. Can you give me a lift?"
I asked him where he lived, and he pointed toward the industrial district. He said, "Over there." I mean, what was I supposed to do? I was headed that way anyway, and I felt bad for the guy. I put him in the back seat, finished my cigarette, and got behind the wheel. When we hit the main avenue, I asked him exactly where he needed to go, and he just hisses,
"To the West Bank."
My heart sank. I thought, great, now I've done it. The local drivers never go there at night. It's a 30-minute drive, and you'll never find a passenger for the trip back. It's just a waste of gas. If he were younger, I would have dropped him at the bridge. But looking at him, I just couldn't do it. I thought, if my own dad was stuck in the middle of the city, I'd want someone to take him home. So I cursed under my breath and stepped on the gas. We got to the middle of the bridge and the clutch failed. I stalled out. While I was trying to get the engine started again, I asked the old man which way to go. He wheezed even quieter than before.
"Straight. Just go straight down the road."
I should have kicked him out right then, but I just felt so sorry for him. Even with the heater on, he was just sitting there shaking. His head was tilted, and his face was all twisted up like he was in pain. He was gripping the door with one hand and his cane with the other. His fingers were so thin, you could see every vein. It was heartbreaking. I decided then that I wouldn't even charge him. So we're driving past the bridge, past the houses, into the warehouse district. The old man is dead silent. I kept checking on him in the mirror, but then, suddenly, I couldn't see him anymore. I turned around. He wasn't there. I pulled off the road, stopped the car, and went to check the back, but the seat was empty. He was gone. He didn't fall on the floor, he didn't jump out. He just evaporated. No cane, no nothing. It felt like someone hit me in the head with a hammer. My neck started aching, probably from my blood pressure spiking. I just sat there, with the engine running and the doors locked, staring at that empty back seat, waiting for something to happen. I couldn't wrap my brain around it. I got out of the car to see if he'd somehow fallen out. It was insane. I immediately stepped into this thick mud. I didn't know where I was. I opened the back door. Empty. I started to feel sick. I looked around, and the road was just gone. I was standing in some kind of yard. It was dark, creepy, and the wind was screaming. To my right was a wall made of concrete slabs. In front of me was either a warehouse or a boiler room with broken windows and no lights. I kept looking around, trying to figure out how I got there. A second ago, we were flying down the asphalt, and now I was in this alley. It was like the car, and I had been ripped out of the world and shoved into this mud. No crash, no bump. The road was just erased and replaced with this yard. To my left was a ruined shack, and behind the car, I could see tracks in the mud. I didn't want to get too close to them. I just remember seeing them in my headlights. I don't know what made them. I got back in the car, and I could barely breathe. I tried to turn around in the mud, but I got stuck. I started to panic. I felt this literal fire in my chest. I turned on my high beams, jumped out, and started grabbing bushes by the fence to shove under the tires. The thorns were tearing my hands up, but I didn't care. The whole time, I had this feeling in my back, like someone was watching me. It was freezing cold, but I was dripping with sweat. My gut was telling me I had to get out of there right now. I'd figure out how it happened later. I just had to move. I got back in, gave it some gas, and finally, the car moved. I drove along the fence with my high beams on, but I couldn't see anything. Just 20 feet of light, and then total blackness. Then I hit a corner and turned right. Suddenly, 2 lights sparkled in the distance. Headlights. I slammed on the brakes. 1 minute it's pitch black, the next there's a car coming at me. I wanted to floor it, but I got stuck in the mud again. These headlights are getting closer, but they aren't rushing. They're just creeping toward me. I jumped out again, tearing at the bushes, my hands shaking so hard I could barely move. I was swearing at that old man out loud. I was grabbing sticks and leaves, anything I could find. I could hear the hum of the other engine now. I didn't even have a flashlight, just a lighter that wasn't doing anything. The car was almost on top of me when I jumped back inside. I didn't even close the door before I hit the gas. I swerved, drove maybe 10 feet, and skidded off to the side. I wasn't even thinking anymore. I just drove. Finally, I hit asphalt. There were streetlights. I felt a little better, but I didn't recognize where I was. There were just dark shacks everywhere. No lights in the windows, no people, no other cars. My knees were shaking so bad I could barely keep my foot on the pedal. My teeth were chattering. It was freezing in the car, even though the heater was blasting. I checked the vent. The air was warm, but I couldn't get warm. It was a cold that came from the inside. Breathing felt heavy, like I was inhaling something thick instead of air. And it got darker. The streetlights were on, but they didn't really light anything up. It was like the darkness was pushing back against them. I cracked the window to listen, but I couldn't even hear my own engine. I coughed, and I heard that, but the car was moving in total silence. I was terrified. I drove another half-mile and stopped by a pole. The road just went on forever into the black. No stars, no moon. I got out with the engine running and looked around. The wind was pulling at my jacket, but it didn't make a sound. It was dead silent. Just my breath and my heartbeat. I looked at my watch. It was stopped. Look, it hasn't moved since. 12 o'clock midnight. That was the exact time I picked up that old man. And the scariest part? I realized I had no idea how long I'd been driving. It felt like 40 minutes, but when I touched my face, I had a full day's worth of stubble. While I was standing there, I saw those two headlights again in my peripheral vision. My heart started pounding. And then, in that total silence, I heard a voice in the dark behind me. It was calling my name. It sounded just like my mother used to call me when I was a kid. Really sweet.
Jason. Jason.
But every time it said it, the voice got rougher. It didn't sound like her anymore.
Jason. Jason.
It got hoarse and low. It wasn't just calling me now. It was screaming at me, swearing at me.
Jason! Jason!
I froze. When I finally could move, I started spinning around, looking for where it was coming from. But it wasn't coming from the dark anymore. It was right in my ear, like someone was standing right on top of me, louder and angrier. I was twitching like I was having a seizure. I was losing my mind. I couldn't see anyone, just those headlights in the distance getting closer. I threw myself back into the car, slammed the door, and cranked the engine. I was soaked in sweat. And then the voice started again. But this time, it was inside my head.
Jason! Jason!
I floored it. I didn't care where I was going. I just had to get away. I looked in the mirror, and the headlights were gone. They were just gone. But I kept flying. I couldn't even see the road, just darkness and power poles zooming by. Then, I burst onto an intersection. No lights, no signs. Just 4 roads leading into a black void. I stopped. My ears were ringing, and I couldn't catch my breath. Then, through the window, I saw something move. Fast, like someone was trying to see who just drove by. I couldn't make out what it was, but it got even colder. Then, thump. The car swayed, like someone just sat down. I felt it. There was something in the back seat with me. I whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. I turned around slowly. Nobody. If I'd seen that old man there, I would have had a heart attack on the spot. My hearing started to come back. I could hear my own breath, and before I could even exhale, someone knocked on my window. I was looking at the back seat, so I didn't see who did it. I spun around, but the window was empty. I just started screaming. Not even from fear anymore, just from being so helpless. It felt like the whole world was mocking me. I hit the gas again. I just had to keep moving. But I didn't know the road. The streetlights flickered, but the view never changed. The same shacks, the same empty windows. The air felt like it was stuffed with cotton. I drove for maybe an hour until my lights hit a person. A woman was standing right in the middle of the road. She had a coat on and short hair. I slammed on the brakes and almost hit her. I wanted to yell out to her. She was the first person I'd seen, but she just stood there with her head down and her hands at her sides. She wouldn't move. I did something stupid and honked at her. She lifted her head. She didn't have a nose or a mouth, and instead of eyes, she had these black crosses, like they'd been sewn there. I felt a lump in my throat. I thought, this is it. she's gonna kill me. But she just put her hands over her face and started shaking like she had a fever. I was pressed back into my seat, hands shaking on the wheel. Then, she dropped her hands. Her face was smooth again, except for those crosses. She turned sideways and limped off the road into the bushes. She moved like her legs wouldn't work right. I didn't move until she was gone. Then I just drove. I had less than half a tank of gas. I was like a zombie. I finally snapped out of it when I saw lights in the mirror again. Before I could even react, a building appeared ahead. The road just ended. There were iron gates and a concrete fence. I stopped about 30 feet away so I could see the sign. It was rusty and peeling. The numbers, I can still see them. 030201. It looked like a date, but I didn't know what the 01 meant. Suddenly, those headlights were behind me again. They were catching up, lighting up the inside of my car. Still no sound. It was freezing. My hands were so numb, I could barely pull them off the wheel. I put it in reverse, thinking I'd run back to the intersection. Then the gate started to open. Suddenly, the silence was gone. This screeching sound, so loud it made my teeth ache, filled the air. I heard the roar of an engine, but it wasn't mine. I hit the gas, but the car wouldn't move. The car behind me was pushing me toward the gates. I didn't see anyone opening them. They just moved on their own. I reached for the ignition, turned the key, and the car finally started. I spun around, floored it, and flew past those headlights. It was a car, a black hearse, like something out of an old movie. I crossed myself and just flew down the road. There was a whisper in my head, and the cold was wrapping around me like I'd fallen through ice. Then, a click. Darkness, a quiet beep in my ears. I realized my eyes were closed. When I opened them, I was looking at a door, our front door. And I still can't get warm. How long was I there? Look at how much I've grown out. There's this emptiness in my chest now, like something was stolen from me. The fear won't go away. Where was I? What were those numbers? Who was that woman? What was that hearse? When my dad finished, my mom wasn't even crying anymore. We just looked at each other, and nobody knew what to say. Dad looked totally defeated. He downed 2 more glasses of bourbon. I don't know what my mom was thinking, if she believed him or not. If he hadn't looked so terrified and his hands hadn't been shaking like that, she probably would have thought he just went on a bender. But that wasn't him. He never disappeared. I felt sick. I tried to make sense of it, but it was impossible. Finally, my mom broke the silence. She sounded relieved just to have him back.
Okay, Jason. It's okay. You're home. Let's just go to bed. Tomorrow morning, we'll go see the priest. He'll listen. He'll know what to do.
No, you go.
My dad said, waving her off.
I'm gonna sit here a bit longer. Just let me be for a minute.
The sun was starting to come up. My mom stood up, kissed him on the head, and went to the bedroom. She whispered for me to go to bed, too. I didn't fight her. My eyes were heavy. At the doorway, I looked back at my dad and quietly said goodnight. He called out to me.
Listen, don't quit school. Don't end up like me, working 2 jobs. And take care of your little sister when she gets here.
He actually smiled. A little bit. I just looked at him. My dad, finally home. And I didn't know what to say.
That's it,
He said.
Go to sleep.
I nodded and walked away. But I turned around to look at him one last time. Maybe it was because I was so tired, or maybe it was real. But his body by the window looked see-through. In the morning sun, it looked like my father was glowing. That afternoon, my mom woke me up. She was hysterical. My dad was gone. The doors were still locked from the inside. The safety chain we'd put on that night was still hanging there, untouched. His clothes were gone. His shoes were gone. His car wasn't outside. It was like he had never come home at all. My mom said she'd waited for him to come to bed, but he never did. She said she'd suddenly been hit by this incredibly deep sleep, just like I had. We called his work, but he hadn't shown up. But this time, my mom didn't call the police. She just said,
Let them keep looking.
Life changed for us after that. It was really hard for a long time, but eventually, things got better. I kept the promise I made to him. I did well in school, went to college, and got a good job. I took care of my sister too. I eventually moved her and my mom into the city with me. I never saw my father again. My relatives talked, of course. They tried to tell me he just walked out on us, but I never believed that. Every time I think about this story, it hurts. I regret that I didn't say anything back to him that morning. I regret that I didn't look at him just a little bit longer while he was glowing in the sun. I wish I'd run up and hugged him one last time. I don't know the name of that dark, horrible place he fell into, but I like to think it's not all bad there, since they let him come back, even if it was just for a little while, to say goodbye to his family. They say as long as you remember someone, their soul stays alive. So my dad, wherever he is still out there. I'll never forget him.